Picture a smoky barbecue stand in the 1990s Baltimore, burgers sizzling on the grill. Customers eat, unaware of a chilling claim. The meat might not be pork. Joe Metheny, a Baltimore killer, confessed to serving human flesh. Because his words horrified a city, you'll want to hear this. Hit like, and let's unravel his gruesome story. Viewer discretion is advised, because this case involves murder and unsettling claims of cannibalism. Joe Metheny's story ranks among America's most chilling true crime cases. A Baltimore drifter, he confessed to killing multiple women in the 1990s. Furthermore, he claimed to have mixed their flesh with pork, selling it as burgers at his roadside barbecue stand. As a result, his confession stunned investigators and horrified a city. But how much was true? Consequently, this documentary will trace Metheny's life, his confirmed crimes, and the questions that linger. Meanwhile, we'll honor victims like Kathy Ann Magaziner and Kimberly Lynn Spicer, whose lives were stolen. Thus, we'll explore Baltimore's troubled 1990s streets, where drugs and violence created a perfect storm. Subscribe now to stay with us for more true crime stories. What drove a man to such horrors? To understand, we must first look at who Joe Metheny was. Following the chilling claims of Joe Metheny's roadside barbecue stand, we must first understand the man behind the horrors. Born on March 2, 1955, in Baltimore, Maryland, Joseph Roy Metheny grew up in a home fractured by hardship. Because his father died when Joe was young, his mother worked tirelessly, leaving little time to nurture her children. As a result, Metheny drifted into a troubled youth, seeking escape in alcohol and drugs by his early teens. Furthermore, he dropped out of high school, wandering Baltimore's gritty streets, where poverty and crime were rampant. Meanwhile, in the 1970s, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, serving briefly in Germany. However, addiction shadowed him even there. Consequently, Metheny returned to Baltimore, a city grappling with its own demons: drugs, unemployment, and violence. By the 1990s, Metheny was a towering figure, 6'1", weighing over 400 pounds, living in a dilapidated trailer in South Baltimore's industrial fringes. Because he worked sporadic jobs at a pallet factory, his income barely sustained him. Thus, he sank deeper into substance abuse, his life a cycle of despair. But then, a personal betrayal ignited a rage that would define his legacy. His girlfriend, a fellow addict, abandoned him and took their young son. As a result, Metheny's anger festered, targeting women he deemed responsible for his pain. He blamed his ex for his loss. He resented her choices. He sought to punish others like her. Comment below, what turns a man's pain into such darkness? Moreover, Metheny's isolation grew. Because he lived on society's edges, he had few connections to ground him. His trailer, tucked near Baltimore's port, became a symbol of his detachment. Meanwhile, the city around him struggled with a heroin epidemic, leaving vulnerable populations, sex workers, the homeless, exposed to predators. Thus, Metheny found easy targets for his growing fury. But here's a shocking twist. Court records later revealed he kept meticulous notes about his victims, hinting at a calculated mind beneath his chaotic exterior. This detail, uncovered during his 1996 arrest, stunned investigators. For now, picture Metheny in that trailer, a man consumed by loss, addiction, and rage, plotting his next move. His life was a storm of anger and desperation, conditions that fueled a horrifying descent. But what did he do with that rage? His first confirmed crimes would soon reveal the depths of his violence. As Metheny's rage consumed him, his descent into violence began. By 1994, he unleashed his fury on Baltimore's most vulnerable, sex workers and homeless women, luring them to his isolated trailer in South Baltimore. Because these women lived on society's margins, they were easy targets. Consequently, Metheny exploited their desperation, offering money or drugs to draw them in. Kathy Ann Magaziner, a 39-year-old mother, became one of his first confirmed victims. Furthermore, court records show she was found in 1994, her body discarded near his trailer, her life stolen in a brutal attack. Meanwhile, Metheny continued his hunt, undeterred by police attention. Thus another woman, Kimberly Lynn Spicer, a 26-year-old struggling to survive Baltimore's drug-ravaged streets, fell prey in 1996. Her murder, like Kathy's, was confirmed through evidence tied to Metheny's trailer. Why did he target the marginalized? Because Baltimore's heroin epidemic left countless women unprotected, Metheny saw them as disposable. As a result, he struck repeatedly, his trailer a house of horrors. He lured with promises, he killed with rage, he hid his crimes with cunning. Court documents later revealed Metheny claimed up to 13 victims, though only 2 murders were proven. Moreover, his boasts about additional killings stunned investigators because no bodies were found for most of his alleged victims. Comment below. Why would someone confess to unproven crimes? But then, a chilling detail emerged. Metheny kept body parts in his trailer, discovered during a 1996 search, suggesting his violence went beyond murder. This revelation, buried in police reports, hinted at something far worse. Meanwhile, Baltimore's 1990s underbelly enabled Metheny's spree. Because police were overwhelmed by drug-related crime, cases involving sex workers often went cold. Consequently, Metheny operated in shadows, his trailer tucked near industrial lots where screams went unheard. Thus, he targeted women society overlooked, exploiting a city in crisis. However, his confidence grew reckless. As a result, he began to taunt authorities with his confessions, claiming a body count that strained belief. For example, he described killing a woman under a bridge, but no evidence supported it. Nevertheless, his detailed accounts kept investigators searching because they feared he spoke some truth. What drove this brutality? Metheny's hatred, fueled by his girlfriend's betrayal, targeted women he deemed worthless. But his crimes were about to take a turn that would shock even hardened detectives. Following Metheny's brutal murders, a confession emerged that stunned even seasoned investigators. In 1996, while in custody, Joe Metheny told police he didn't just kill his victims. Because he sought to dispose of evidence, he claimed to have dismembered their bodies, mixing their flesh with pork. Furthermore, he said he sold these as burgers at his roadside barbecue stand in South Baltimore. Consequently, his chilling words, recorded in court documents, sent shockwaves. The human body tastes very similar to pork. Nobody knew the difference. As a result, customers who ate at his stand, unaware of his claims, became part of a horrifying narrative. Thus, the idea of ordinary people consuming human flesh gripped Baltimore with fear. Comment below. Could anyone suspect such a gruesome act? However, a shocking twist surfaced. Because police searched Metheny's trailer and stand, they found no evidence linking human remains to the burgers. Meanwhile, investigators noted Metheny's tendency to exaggerate, casting doubt on his claims. For instance, he boasted of killing up to 13 people, yet only 2 murders were confirmed. Nevertheless, his detailed confession kept authorities on edge, because some details aligned with evidence. He described his victims, he outlined his methods, he bragged without remorse. But was he a cannibal or a liar seeking infamy? Moreover, Metheny's motives tied back to his rage. Because his girlfriend's betrayal fueled his hatred, he targeted women he called worthless, particularly sex workers and addicts. As a result, his trailer became a trap where he unleashed his fury. Then another disturbing detail emerged. Metheny admitted to storing body parts in Tupperware containers, found during a 1996 search of his trailer. Consequently, this discovery lent some weight to his claims, though no direct link to the burgers was proven. Thus, investigators faced a puzzle. How much was truth? How much was fiction? Meanwhile, Metheny reveled in the attention, describing his stand as a special meat market. For example, he claimed to have served special burgers to truckers and locals, blending human flesh with pork to mask it. Yet because no customers reported anything unusual, his story remained unverified. Nevertheless, the horror of his words lingered, because the possibility, however slim, was terrifying. What kind of mind crafts such a tale? His confessions, whether true or not, pointed to a deeper darkness that would soon unravel with one woman's courage. After Metheny's chilling confessions, his reign of terror seemed unstoppable. However, one woman's courage changed everything. In December 1996, Rita Kemper, a 37-year-old sex worker, entered Metheny's trailer, lured by promises of money. Because he attacked her with brutal force, she faced a fight for her life. Consequently, Rita escaped, bleeding and terrified, running barefoot through South Baltimore streets to find police. As a result, her bravery led to Metheny's arrest on December 15, 1996. For instance, officers descended on his trailer, a ramshackle structure near the city's industrial edge. Meanwhile, they searched for evidence, uncovering bloodstains and tools linked to violence. Thus, Metheny was cornered, but the case was far from closed. Comment below, how did Rita's courage change this story? Moreover, Metheny's confessions poured out during interrogations. Because he admitted to killing Kathy Ann Magaziner and Kimberly Lynn Spicer, police had solid evidence for 2 murders. Furthermore, he claimed a body count as high as 13, detailing killings under bridges and in alleyways. Yet because no remains were found for most victims, these claims couldn't be verified. Then a startling revelation hit. Police found Tupperware containers in his trailer, holding what Metheny called special meat. Nevertheless, tests showed no human remains linked to his barbecue stand, leaving the cannibalism claim unproven. Why confess to such horrors? Was he taunting authorities, or was there truth in his words? Meanwhile, Metheny's lack of remorse shocked everyone. For example, in court he declared, "I enjoyed it. I had no regrets," his voice cold and defiant. As a result, prosecutors painted him as a monster who targeted society's forgotten. He killed with precision, he disposed with care, he bragged with pride. Consequently, in 1998, Metheny was convicted of Magaziner's and Spicer's murders, receiving a life sentence without parole. However, the unverified killings haunted investigators because his detailed accounts suggested more victims. Thus, police kept searching, hoping to find closure for grieving families. But another twist emerged. Metheny's health declined in prison, and on August 5, 2017, he was found dead at 62, taking his secrets to the grave. Nevertheless, the burger stand mystery lingered. Because Metheny's cannibalism claims lacked evidence, some believed he exaggerated to cement his infamy. For instance, he described serving special burgers to truckers, yet no customer ever reported anything unusual. Meanwhile, Baltimore grappled with the horror of his words because the possibility, however faint, was terrifying. What drove this man to confess such atrocities? His arrest stopped the killings, but the questions he left behind would challenge our understanding of truth and evil. Following Metheny's arrest and chilling confessions, one question remains unanswered. Was Joe Metheny truly a cannibal, or was it a fabricated tale? Because his claims about serving human flesh at his Baltimore barbecue stand gripped the public, psychologists have since analyzed his motives. For instance, experts suggest his confessions blended truth with exaggeration, a tactic to assert control over his narrative. As a result, Metheny's boasts about mixing human flesh with pork may have been bravado, designed to shock. Meanwhile, his rage, rooted in his girlfriend's abandonment and his son's loss, drove his violence. Consequently, he targeted vulnerable women, sex workers, and homeless individuals, whom he dehumanized as worthless. Thus, his hatred was personal, his violence was deliberate, his confessions were calculated. Comment below, was Metheny's cannibal claim a twisted fantasy or a horrifying truth? Metheny's death in prison on August 5, 2017, at age 62, closed the case without answers. Nevertheless, families of unverified victims, those he claimed to have killed but were never found, still seek closure because his confessions left more questions than certainties. Furthermore, Metheny's case forces us to confront broader truths. Because Baltimore's 1990s crisis enabled his crimes, it revealed how society's neglect of the marginalized creates fertile ground for predators. For instance, sex workers and homeless women, often ignored, became his targets. Consequently, his story sparked calls for change, urging better protections for vulnerable communities. Thus, we must learn from this tragedy. We must see the unseen. We must protect the unprotected. We must act before evil strikes. Subscribe now to join us for more true crime stories that uncover these hard truths.